Hey everyone, let's have a quick overview how to use Xcode asset catalog generator. The purpose of the tool is to automate generating different optimal asset sizes for the asset catalog, so we end up with something like this. I made a tool for my own needs when I develop games for Apple's platforms, so feel free to use it as is. Most likely I'll keep tweaking and adding to it as I begin new game projects, but I suppose it will stay more or less the same, so this video will remain relevant. Anyway, let's walk through how to use the current version. You can get the tool on GitHub. I'll post the link to the repository in the video description, or you can also find the link on my website. I will also post that in the video description. I prefer to clone it using git clone, but you can also download it as a zip file and just unpack it where you want to have it. I store the tool in a dedicated folder in my game project, which also allows me to commit it to version control, which is good as it contains a config file for the game assets and a small file-based database to speed up the generation that I would also recommend to submit to version control. Anyway, after you have installed the actual tool, you need to install some dependencies as well. It's a Node.js-based tool, at least in its current iteration, so it requires that you have Node.js installed on your computer. If not, that can easily be installed using a homebrew. Anyway, I assume you have Node.js, so just go to the location where you put the tool and install the dependencies. So anyway, to reiterate, git clone, the actual tool. Go inside the folder. And then install the dependencies. And voila. So once everything is in place and the dependencies are installed, you have to set up a little bit of configuration in the config.js file. Actually, there are 3 places. So if you open that file in your editor, you can do it in Xcode or use some other editor. I sometimes use Sublime Text or VS Code, but for quick changes, I prefer to just do it directly in Xcode. So you need to set the source images route and the asset catalog route, as well as an author. That's kind of optional, but it adds, when it generates the asset catalog, it adds that value there. Author is usually your reverse domain name, so I could use com.bitbibop, or if I can spell bitbibop as the author. For the source images, it's an absolute path. It might work with relative paths. I haven't actually tried it, but I always just use an absolute path because I'm a single developer, so it works out fine for me. So I have, let's see here, as an example here, art. The different artwork I make for a game, I create one folder, in this case I call it output, where the final versions of all the assets end up. This is the very, very high-res versions. So for instance, if I render something from Blender, if I do something in Photoshop, the final image can end up here. And it's usually much, much higher resolution. Well, not usually, it is much, much higher resolution than I need in the game. So here I have, for instance, some UI elements. Well, it's too big for the screen recording because I record them very high, as mentioned. So anyway, everything ends up here, including image sequences like we have here for different animations. That's going to become sprite atlases. Okay, so these are rendered at all way higher than I need. So the folder here is what will end up as the source images route, and the asset catalog route is the absolute path to where actually this one your asset catalog is stored on disk, so it can generate, so it knows where to save the generated images and where to create the structure files or the JSON files that actually defines the asset catalog that goes with the image files. So let's go back here to config. So I'm just gonna actually steal it from my old project here. So if I can get the correct here, we have, and now I just gonna copy here. So in my case, this would be the source images route. That will go here. Users Johan code hyperstore have some assets are. So that's where I store them, and I didn't use output here, so I'm gonna have to actually add output for every part. I guess the reason I didn't add output here is because I probably changed strategy during development of the game, so some assets are not in the output folder. So probably in my next game I will be more thinking a little bit more ahead. Anyway, and then we have the actual path to the asset catalog, and that's here. So it would look like this, and that's it. Now we have set up everything we need to actually, so it actually works. Then we have to, of course, add the assets. And there are a few different formats how to structure the assets depending on what type of asset it is. So let's do a little quick walk through what kind of assets you can add and how to define them. Tools supports a few different types of assets that can be generated for the asset catalog. I put up an initial wiki where I've documented the structure for each type. I see a little bit of work in progress, but I mean, it does the job for now. And I will post a link to the wiki in the video description too, and on my website, so it should be easy to find it. And blah, blah, blah. Here we have config again, which we just walked through. Then we have the first type, which is an image set. And an image set is basically a single image. And set is because it has different sizes. So it's multiple sizes from one image. So you give the image a name. That's the actual name it's going to get in the asset catalog. So if you take this example here, HUD, it would be called HUD in the asset catalog. Then we have the relative path from the image source assets route to where to find the higher source image. The target path is where it's going to end up in the asset catalog. So it's going to be in UI HUD inside the asset catalog. And this size is the target size. And this size is in points. So that's the value you're going to use in the game if you actually define the size in points. So, I guess self-explanatory. And then the format is if you want the asset to end up as a PNG or a JPEG. I think that's the two formats that I support for now. Then one is, of course, important one here. You have to define the type of the asset. And this case is an image set. And finally, which formats you want to generate for. So you want to use, in this case, we want to use the HUD on the iPhone, the iPad, the Mac, and the Apple TV. So pretty much every format. So that's about it. So if we went into the actual JSON file, the config.json, we would, let's see, we have to open up here. Then this could be the first entry here. And Xcode is not super good at formatting JSON, which is the reason I sometimes use Sublime text instead, because it make very elegant cut and paste, and JSON end up where expected to end up. But anyway, so we can live with this for now. So here we have it, and this would then generate this asset. Moving on. The next, and of course, here's an explanation of what each attribute pair does. And then we have image sequence, which is a little bit more complex to set up because I define this for my own needs. So when I render a sequence, that sequence can actually contain multiple animations. Like maybe the first 30 frames is the jump animation, then the next 15 frames is the run animation. So while it still is one sequence, I wanted an Xcode to end up as multiple folders or multiple sequences. So and of course, if you only have one animation in the sequence, you just define one entry and it should work fine. And then it's the same as the last time. We have the size, that is target size in points, and type in this case will be type sequence. So if we look in Xcode as an example here of a sequence, actually I can revert this config to the config actually this game had. Now when we have looked through how it works, I'm going to discard here and here. So if we have a sequence here for this game, that would be here we have a sequence. So in this case I only have one animation in the sequence, and that's a door opening, and it's 16 frames from 0 to 15. So this is important, the two hash characters. If the numbered sequence is no, I didn't have this one here. Can we go back to where we were? If the numbered sequence has a certain number of characters defining it, so here was not this one, sorry, and not this one. Here we go. So this has 0, 0, 0, 1, so it's two characters defining the number in the sequence. So that means you put 2 here, which helps it identifies the actual number. If I had 3 characters, it would be 3 hash characters here. And this is going to end up generating a folder. And in this case, I actually made it a child of another type, which is the Sprite Atlas, because I wanted this to end up in a Sprite Atlas folder. So let's go back to the documentation. And that's actually the next type here, Sprite Atlas, which basically you set the type, the target in the Xcode asset catalog, and the name we want to have, and then an array of assets that will be included in that atlas. So the assets can be either image sequences or image sets. So you can mix them as you see fit. So in this case here, I had an atlas with 2 image sequences, because this animation is divided into 2 different layers. So if we actually see what happened in Xcode, go back at assets, and this would be here. This is the spawner Sprite Atlas is the name. And if you go back to config here, this is actually what the name I gave it here. And then we get the spawner, and this name doesn't actually matter in this case. Maybe not even sure if that's needed with the name when you make a sequence, because it actually creates the actual images with the same name, I suppose. Well, it's an early version of the tool, so yeah, spawner core 01 was the name that was generated, and down here it generated with the name spawner door. All right, so this is how it works. Now I remember. So it takes this as a name and then underscore the name of the actual animation. So spawner door and spawner core and then underscore the actual frame number. So, okay, then it makes sense. So that's about it. Then I actually have 2 more types, which is level and group. But they are very much a work in progress yet and will probably change a bit. Maybe not group. Group is basically just to be able to share information. If everything is going to be image set, have the same devices and so on, it's just going to inherit from the group. But level is a special type I made for a game I'm working on that, well, it will come in a future version. So for now it supports Sprite Atlas, image sequence, and image set. And then we'll see what might come down the line. So, and then finally, let's just see how to actually generate the assets once you have your config file set up. So finally, let's generate some assets. So the tool have two possible commands you can run from the command line. It's run dev or run prod. Run dev is to actually try the generation without having to update your asset catalog. It stores the generated images and the JSON files for them inside your tools directory, and it's by default git ignored, so it's not going to end up in your version control either. So it's a good way to test your settings or your config file before doing a real build. And run prod, of course, actually builds to the asset catalog. So let's check it out with the example of the game I had as an example before. So first of all, I'm going to actually clear out the file. So we have, let's close up a little bit here. So we have this file, ChecksumDB.json. This one is actually only checked when you build from production. When you do run dev, it ignores this file. This file is to avoid generating files that already are generated. But let's check that one again when we check npm run prod. So there is a git ignore file by default which ignores output and node modules. Node modules is the dependencies, no need to put them in version control. And output is when you run npm run dev, where your testing ends up. So if we clear out this folder, well, we don't have to clear it out, it actually overwrites what's there. So if we go to the tool directory and just do npm run dev, oops, and I spell like I don't know my keys, so here we go. And now it builds the entire asset catalog in the output folder. So you get a little bit of a log here, what it actually did. And now it does it all because I built it to dev. So you get the complete build here. And all of these files have now ended up in output. So you get those image set, Sprite Atlas files, like Xcode wanna have them, and every like a sequence here ends up in their little subfolders, and you have a JSON file generated with all the different idioms or devices that you support, and so on. So this is a complete asset catalog, and this one is good for debugging. And of course, if you build for, let's just clear out this asset catalog here a little bit. I can delete the enemies folder, for instance. Do I have a delete key? There we go. So, and what we're going to do more is, when you build for production, we have this DB file that is generated. It just stores a checksum of each original source file. So when you make a new build, it just compares this checksum and see if it's already here, it's not going to build it again. And that's just to avoid if there would be a slight difference, like if you regenerate the image, it's not going to be the same as before because there's going to be new date tag, for instance. So it's going to go into version control again, and that's sort of a waste to keep storing the same image over and over. So once it's built and haven't changed, it doesn't generate it again on the next build or the coming builds until it actually have changes. So for now, let's just basically just clear this array. So we're going to build everything this time because we are testing. So this time I'm going to do, can I make this window a little bit smaller here so we see the bottom? npm run prod. So now we're going to build the entire, asset catalog. So if we go back, and now this one has been regenerated. So now we have a database file here again. And if we go to the asset catalog, now we have the enemies folder back. And it has all been generated again. So if I make a small change, or if I make any change to any source image, I just go back and rerun this script. And if I run it now, it's going to skip every file because actually nothing had changed. If I had changed, for instance, the bullet design, it would regenerate the bullet and update the asset catalog. So to me, in a way, this is a very efficient way once you have this set up to quickly keep your asset catalog up to date with your source artwork, and you get all the sizes you need generated in the best possible resolution for each device. So you get an optimal app size too, where you don't waste any space of having artwork in a higher resolution than needed. So anyway, I guess that kind of wraps it up for how to use this tool. As mentioned, it's a work in progress. If you have a problem, reach out to me on Twitter, or even better, feel free to make a pull request. If you fix something, I would be happy, and if you add something that are of use to you, it might be of use to me and others as well. So pull requests are welcome. Anyway, I hope you find this tool useful. So see you around.